Welcome to the NASCAR and NBC Podcast, Playoff Edition. I'm your host, Nate Ryan, joined for the first time during the playoffs by Kyle Petty, the first guest ever on the NASCAR and NBC Podcast.
Wow.
You remember that?
I can't believe after that one there was a second NASCAR and NBC Podcast with Nate Ryan.
It received such rave reviews. We're still going here more than 3 years later, and we thank you for being here after another eventful playoff race, Texas Motor Speedway. Kevin Harvick wins. We just did NASCAR America, and we talked about the Harvick attitude and mindset going into this race being a lot different than what we're used to. And he told you guys on the post-race show that they essentially put all their eggs in the Texas basket, which I think surprised all of us, right?
It did. It really surprised me because we just continue to talk Phoenix. Kevin Harvick and Phoenix. Kevin Harvick and Phoenix. They go together. But, you know, Kevin said, so we went all in. We just went all in for Texas. Now, understand, this is the third year in a row they've won Texas in the playoffs, I guess. So at the same time, though, the piece that stuck out to me was, under this package, we believe the Toyotas are going to be a better car at Phoenix. So it was like, hey, y'all think I'm going to do good at Phoenix? Watch me right here at Texas. You know what I mean? One of those things. It was like smoke and mirrors a little bit, but man, they went all in. They were 2 or 3 tenths faster. The Stewart-Haas racing cars run first, second, and third. I mean, it was that dominating performance from Stewart-Haas Racing and from Kevin Harvick that we got used to a couple of years ago, just clicking them off.
Do you think they rope-a-doped Joe Gibbs Racing a little bit and lulled them into a false sense of security? Because you were saying you went back on the team plane with Gibbs in this somber mood at this.
Yes.
How did this happen? And I don't remember Harvick talking a lot about, hey, and maybe by design, maybe just what happened. But I don't remember him thumping his chest and saying, Texas is our path to the championship.
No, I listen, after the race was the first time that for me, to hear him say, we were confident coming in here, this was our place. Yeah. And I'm like, they didn't say that during the week. They didn't say that during qualifying. They didn't say that before practice. But I do believe they caught Joe Gibbs Racing on their back foot, on their heels. I think they felt, if I look at what Denny Hamlin did, if I look at what even Truex, and Truex gets a pass. Truex gets a pass because they can go there and run their car backwards all day long. They don't care. You know what I mean? Right. They are headed to Miami. Right. But if you look at it, it's like, I'm Denny Hamlin. We're with Joe Gibbs Racing. We're going to have, at one point in time, we were going to have all 4 of our cars at Daytona or at Homestead. Then we're going to have 3 of our cars at Homestead. Now we're down to, are we going to have 2 cars at Homestead? That kind of thing. But I think going in there, it was like, we're 20, 24 points ahead. We're safe. I think it showed coming out of there. You're never safe. Which, if we go off of that, then Joey Logano and Kyle Busch, they're not safe going into to Phoenix. But I think it's a little bit different scenario there.
Yeah, and certainly Denny Hamlin is not safe, now below the cut line.
Yes.
Makes this mistake in the traction compound, which is where Chase Elliott lost it as well. Yeah. Kind of odd that guys running where they're supposed to be gripped, and we heard drivers say it just didn't come in until about halfway through the race, I guess.
Yeah, halfway through the race. But this is, I guess what I want to say is the guys, the traction compound has to, and I've never driven in it, so let me be real clear about that. But they keep talking about an activation temperature, or the temperature needs to be up, or the sun needs to be just beating down on it. It needs to be a little bit warmer. If you go back to what Kyle Larson said before the race started, Kyle Larson at one time said, people think I'm the first guy to go up there. I'm not the first guy to go up there. I just wait till somebody else goes up there, and then I go up there and run faster. Okay? It's basically what he said. So the guy you think runs the wall, and the guy you think is the daredevil, and the guy you think is, hell-bent for leather, thinks about it a little bit more than obviously Brad Keselowski thought about it, or Chase Elliott and those guys. Those guys went up there thinking, okay, I'm not making time where I'm at. Let me get up here and see if it'll work. And they were just out of it. It moved up. If you watch the race, it looks like it moves up about 6 inches every 20 or 30 laps until it widens out. And then you can physically see the shiny part up towards the top and where they've run it in. And then it became a groove. But when those guys went up there, I didn't understand him going up there that early with that much to lose. I didn't understand Chase being up there. I didn't understand Brad Keselowski being up there, even though he's not in the playoffs. I didn't understand him being up there with that much to lose. But I think you saw when his car stepped out, and in the background, Ricky Stenhouse had to react, and there was nothing to hold him when he reacted.
Yeah, and it's interesting that accident happened before Hamlin's crash. And obviously Chase Elliott happened in the first, 15 laps or whatever. So Hamlin saw both of those things and yet still made the same mistake. And you've been one of many people talking about it. This has felt like the year of Denny Hamlin. This feels like the year when Denny's finally going to put it all together. And it's been mental mistakes, self-induced errors that have cost him in the past from being that driver. Currently I would say best active driver not to have won a championship. He carries that mantle because of mistakes like Sunday night at Texas.
And I, and I'm a little harsh, and I'm sorry I'm harsh, but I go back to Phoenix. What was that? 11, 12?
2010.
10.
Jimmy's fifth championship.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. All the way back to 10 when they were the best car. Okay. Denny Hamlin was going to win that championship. Going to get it done. They go to Phoenix. They put themselves in a bad place. But when they show up at Phoenix for those press conferences, I thought I'd been out with some of my friends spotlighting deers before it until I saw Denny in the headlights. I mean, he was like caught. It was like it was like he didn't know whether to go left, right. He didn't know what to do, and took a fast car and took himself out of the race coming out of turn 2 on the backstretch at Homestead.
Yep.
And still had a shot at the championship. Still, until that moment, still could have won the championship. So it was almost like he wasn't between his ears, and I've said this before. He just wasn't strong enough between his ears. He just wasn't, and it's not focus. It's not that. It's just mentally he just was not up to the task in 2010. I felt like all year long, Denny Hamlin was way past that point. He was the guy. He was the guy. He was at peace with himself. He was confident. He walked through the garage area carrying the confidence. When they ran bad, he sloughed it off, focused on the next week, and you know what? Most of the time came back the next week and put together a great race. This is the first time that he comes off of a race like Martinsville where there's a little bit of controversy, and he doesn't back it up with a solid run. This is the first time really this year for me watching him. So that scares me for him because now I think he's in a must-win, because I think if you win the first segment and win the second segment, it just gets you back to zero. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then you really then your back's really against the wall in some ways. So Chase is in a better place for me. Elliott, when I look at that. But Denny's deal is, it's tough, man. And it's tough to be considered a shoe-in to go to Homestead. Yeah. And then with one race left in this round, just be considered out.
Well, Denny seemed to strike the right tone in post-race. He owned up to the mistake. He didn't come off as dazed or like, oh my God, what happened? Like, the way, as you said, KP, like in 2010, that was clearly the mind frame he was in. I mean, that Phoenix race, he had the best car. His team just pretty much screwed him on gas mileage.
Yeah, they did.
They ran the wrong carburetor. Jimmy Johnson finishes 5th. Denny Hamlin finishes like 14th with a first place car. And then, like you said, he goes to Miami, and Jimmy Johnson and Kevin Harvick take turns drilling screws in his head over like, hey man, you're under a lot of pressure even though you got the lead. So he cracked that year, and I think he would say that now. Now he gets a chance to go to Phoenix and find not just redemption for that, but get himself to the championship round and win a title. What would it mean? It sounds like Chase Elliott might be your pick to win Phoenix, but if Denny were to pull it off, would this be like sort of a watershed moment for him, even without a championship?
Listen, if Denny Hamlin, for me, and I look at this, if Denny Hamlin goes to Phoenix and wins the race, I as far as I'm concerned, they might as well just go ahead and engrave his name on the trophy because he's going there and win. That's how strong a statement that would be for Denny Hamlin and that team. I'm just straight up. That's the way I feel about it. I also feel like that, and we talk about it all the time, and we've seen Kevin Harvick do it. Back against the wall, call your shot, and go get it done. And Kevin Harvick's done it. We've seen Jimmy Johnson do it. We've seen Kyle Busch do it. We've seen other drivers, and we talk in sports all the time, and Denny is big buddies with Michael Jordan. when it's all on the line, big time players, big game players step up to another level. And Denny is in that position to where he needs to be the guy, or as far as I'm concerned, give me the ball. Give me the ball. You know, you just put it all on me, and I'll go get it done. And if you give Denny the ball and he goes and gets it done in this scenario, under this scenario, he elevates himself to a totally different status than where he is right now in a lot of other people's minds and a lot of drivers' minds. I think a lot of drivers feel like they can still mess with him. You know what I mean? And I do. And I think a lot of drivers still get under his skin a little bit. Joey gets under his skin. I mean, we saw that clearly. Yeah. And you can't, you know, you just can't let a driver get under your skin like that, you know. And so I think if he does this, for me, Denny Hamlin moves. He's a Hall of Fame guy. There's no question about that. No question. We're not talking about that. But to be considered one of the greatest of this period, and not just a guy who won a bunch of races and won big races, but be one of the greatest drivers of this period of time, I think he's got to come out of for me, he has to come out of Phoenix with something.
Yeah, and I agree. He's a Hall of Fame driver, but he's going to need that championship to really cement the resume. And it's interesting what you just said there, KP, about guys feel like they can mess with him. Do you think that's partially that he's the guy who hasn't won the championship despite winning 30-something races this far in his career? Is it a respect factor, or is it just the way he is?
No, because, listen, nobody would ever mess with Mark Martin like that.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I mean, so let's compare him to somebody like that who won everything. It's not that. I don't know what it is. And we talk about it. Everybody has a personality. Yeah, you know what I mean? And some people you can mess with, and some people you can talk to them all day long, and it's not going. Jimmy Johnson's one of those guys that I think you could absolutely send him hate tweets every day, and he doesn't care. Kyle Busch, we know Kyle Busch doesn't care. You know what I mean? And it just because that's not their focus. They don't care what other people think about them. They don't care what the world thinks about them. Their job is and Joey Logano is a great example of a young guy who I think there was a time when you could rattle him, but I think he's way past that stage now. I don't think he really doesn't care what Kyle Larson or any of those guys thinks. You know, he didn't come here to make friends, and I said it the other day. He drives every lap in a race car like it's the last lap he'll ever be in a race car. It's the last lap he's ever going to drive. Not the last lap of the Daytona 500, not the last lap of the Brickyard, the last lap he's ever going to drive. He's going to get the most out of it every single lap. And I'm just, there are guys, and I've said this on myself a million times. When I started racing, I was 18 years old. So I'd roll into Talladega with Pearson and my dad and Cale and Bob, and I've known these guys my whole life. Yeah. And I watched them. I worked on my dad's car, and I'm thinking, I'm gonna show these 40-year-old guys how to get it done now. You know what I mean? I just graduated from high school. I'm 18 years old. I've been playing football, basketball, and baseball. And I'm gonna show them how to get it done. And I went out there and run that race and a couple other races, and I realized that those guys were the toughest guys that I would ever meet in my life.
Not just great race car drivers,
but not physically, but mentally. Their feet could be on fire. It could be 200 degrees, and you know what? Pearson's got a cigarette hung out of his mouth, and he's catching a little wind with his hand out the window, and he's passing you on the outside driving with one hand. They just were determined that nothing was going to come between them and winning a race. Nothing was going to come between them. That's the way it is. And I think people mess with Denny because of 2010, because they saw that deer in the headlight look, and they saw there's a weakness. There is a weakness. That's his Achilles heel, you know, and there's a weakness there that they try to exploit. And when they poke him and mess with him, they feel like they're getting in his head. You don't poke Kyle, you know. You don't poke. You don't poke. And people poke Joey, but Joey pokes back and says, and he just walks away from it. So I don't know. I think they mess with him because they perceive a weakness. In Denny's defense, this year, I haven't perceived that weakness. You know what I mean? I felt like it was really gone. That has gone away to some degree. When the Joey thing last week, it was there a little bit again. with the imitation and some of that stuff, and that's okay because that was cute. I give him credit for that, but it still shouldn't have got under your skin. That if you think your car is that good and you think you're that good, just slough it off, man.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to come back to modern day, but briefly, I got to step back to 1978. Would that have been the year?
79.
79. Who was tougher, Pearson or Yarborough? Who was the toughest of those guys?
Ooh, you know what? That's they used to say if the guys that worked for Cale said if you could tape a $5 bill to the hood of his car and he could see it flutter, just like waving in the breeze, that he would run faster trying to get that $5. You know what I mean? If he could think he could catch up to that $5. And you know what? I don't know. Cale was that guy that, you know, just was going to hammer all day. Pearson was that guy, like Jimmy Johnson, who just got it done, and you didn't even notice he was getting it done. You know what I mean? So smooth, so flawless. Cale was up on that wheel sawing all the time. It was two totally different styles, but they just approached it different, but they were tough.
All right, great perspective. Let's come back to modern day. I want to talk about the two guys who are above the cut line but not in yet, Joey Logano and Kyle Busch. Busch is 2 points up on Logano. Logano, I believe, is 22 points up, or somewhere in that neighborhood over Hamlin. Logano, to me, I mean, talk about a guy who has won a championship and just seems, in some ways, it's not like he's changed, because you're right. Like, the last several years, he has just said, this is how I'm driving. Yeah. You guys can deal with it. I'm going to race, with no quarter every lap, and you guys can deal with it. But I feel like I've seen a different side of him as a champion this year, in that, and we've seen it through these playoffs. I don't know how he's gotten to this point, because he hasn't had a great playoffs.
No idea.
Yeah, like, look where the team is, and to me, it's like that's championship medal, right?
Yes, it is. For me, watching the axle fall out of that thing at Dover, going to Talladega, getting in that wreck, and coming back and fixing it, and then going and finishing that round in Kansas out in the grass with 10 or 15 laps to go. It's like, oh my God, that may be the ugliest round in the history of the NASCAR playoffs for a team to advance. You know what I mean? Yeah. But they found a way to come back and not only maintain their points, they gained points. You know, they gained just enough to be able to keep moving, keep moving. And, it's hard to believe here we are coming off Texas, and the first top 5 they've had. But it's also hard for me to believe that the car that he's racing, the 18 car with Kyle Busch, hadn't won a race in the last 3 or 4 months, and that doesn't really have anything going either when you look at it, because these are the two of the guys, or one of the guys, and the two of the guys that made it to Homestead last year. One of the guys that was considered the big 3 last year, but Joey and those guys, I think that's why they are a championship team. That shows what a championship team does. I think Kevin Harvick and what their team did this past Sunday, getting off sequence, having a mistake, coming back from that mistake, that's championship caliber stuff. We've seen it with Truex's team. There are, and my dad always used to say this, is there's guys that can go fast and there's guys that can race. But there's very few guys that can go fast and race at the same time, because racing is different than just going out and running fast. It's a totally different art. There's teams that can run a race, but there's teams that can win a championship. And they're not always the same teams. Okay, it's not always the same group of guys. And I think when you look at Rodney Childers and Kevin, championship. When you look at Adam Stevens and Kyle, championship. When you look at Cole Pern and Truex, and you look at Joey and Todd Gordon, those are championship caliber teams. Paul Wolf and Brad, even though they're not there. I'm not sure Denny and
Chris Gabehart,
first
year crew chief,
have proven that they're there. I'm not sure that.
Yep.
You know what I mean? I'm not sure that Jimmy with somebody else, and I'm not sure that Chad with William Byron. So yes, we have elements of championship caliber teams, but they're not always put together. So I think sometimes you got to go down the list and look and say, this is why these guys are where they are, because they've proved it. They've proved it with other people. They've proved it with the people they're with. But at the same time, it's a combination of that. And everybody's not going to win a championship. You know what I mean? Everybody's just not. I think it's real funny to me that, and we talk about it all the time, is that, and I was just a regular driver. I was a journeyman driver. I won 7 or 8 races, sat on some poles, had some good years. And in the NFL, I would have been a journeyman player. I was not Tom Brady, okay? But I didn't sit on the bench either. I got to play. You know what I mean? So you're that kind of player. In every sport, you have those players. Everybody's not going to be the GOAT. You know what I mean? Everybody can't be the greatest of all time. You just can't be that.
Yeah.
But there's certain players and certain people in every sport, I think, that gets an opportunity to at least look at that and say, I could be under the right. And I think Truex has become that. I think Joey's that at 27 or 28. Kyle Busch is definitely that. Jimmy Johnson. I think Denny right now has an opportunity to look at it. But will he have an opportunity to join that club and move forward? Yeah. And it's going to be interesting.
That'll be a cruel reality in some ways if it doesn't happen.
If it doesn't happen, that's right.
It's like it's one of those things about sports is that it makes for a great storyline in a way if he doesn't win it, but it's just agonizing for the athlete involved.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been 10 years on the doorstep of this, and
it's like there's somebody standing there and Denny's trying to get in the hottest club. And the bouncer keeps going with the guy behind him. You know what I mean? It's the guy behind you, not you. No, not you. The guy. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's that visual where it's just you never get picked. And Denny is a great race car driver. Okay, I don't want anybody to take anything away from anything that I'm saying to say that Denny Hamlin's not a great race car driver, and hasn't been a great race car driver, and has won big races and has done everything he's done, and has done it on his own, the hard way. He came up the hard way, and he has earned everything that he's got. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you get to cross into that sacred ground. So that's tough.
Yeah. Denny Hamlin actually once owned a nightclub, so he probably had no problem getting in.
True. That's true.
Butter, but
bad example.
Doesn't work that way in the Cup Championship. No, really good example. Really good analogy. A guy who probably doesn't worry about nightclubs at all, Kyle Busch. All he worries about is racing. You mentioned his relationship with Adam Stevens. I mean, he sat here on Motor Mouse last week and talked about how things are still good, even though they haven't had a clean race, really in the playoffs. And you mentioned they haven't won since June. But like Logano, I mean, he hasn't had as ugly a playoffs, but Kyle is right there, poised to advance to the championship round. I felt like we saw some relief from him post-Texas that's been missing in the one-word answer Kyle post-race that we've seen.
I think that Kyle, for me, and this is, okay, I'm my analyst or my smart, like quick-witted. That's the word for smart-ass. My smart-ass way of doing it has not been, even though we get it, there's been too many distractions for him. Yeah. I think there's been a lot of distractions. And with things that go on the racetrack, that's why we get those one-word answers. That's why, whether it's running into a car at Vegas and so you get those one, and that becomes a distraction for him. I think we saw Kyle at Texas be a lot more focused. If Kyle shows up at Phoenix focused, I feel sorry for everybody in Phoenix. If he shows up focused, and if he goes into Homestead, he's going to be dangerous. But, I don't. Kyle Busch, and I said it, we talked about it, he's won 200 plus, I guess, NASCAR races, which was a category that they made up for Kyle Busch. Okay. I'm sorry. You know what I mean? And I don't mean that bad. It's because somebody had to create it, and Kyle Busch created it. So I'm good. But it was not a category in 1960, in 1970s, in the 1980s, in the 1990s. It just wasn't a category. So it's a new category. And that's okay. But I think that 200-plus thing detracted from the point that he won plus 50 and moved into the top 10.
You're right. And there's
that's
been
huge.
No focus.
No focus on that. Kyle Busch is in the top 10 of all-time winners.
No one talks about that.
And
the NASCAR Premier Series.
Of the Premier Series. In the top 10 at 34, right? 34, right along.
Yep.
Huge. That is huge. It's like the Jimmy Johnson 5 in a row that nobody ever wants to talk about. The most amazing record. in sports in a lot of ways. So I look at that sometimes, and I've had this conversation with Kyle, and I said, you can take the 200. I don't care. You know what I mean? That's okay. But that moving into the top 10 at your age against this competition in this day and time, that's huge. That's huge. That's underrated. People need to. And listen, we celebrated Kevin Harvick winning 49. Kyle Busch and Jimmy Johnson are the only 2 guys out there that have won over 50 races that are competing right now. You know what I mean? Tony Stewart retired at 49. Okay, he's not going to get to 50.
Yeah.
Kyle Busch is on the other side of Tony Stewart. We can name off a lot of people that Kyle Busch is on the other side of that are in the Hall of Fame. Okay, that are in the Hall of Fame. So the thing is, I look at Kyle, and I just think Kyle's had an off year because he's made mistakes on the racetrack that I don't remember him making last year. But this package is a different package too. And he's had to change his driving style just as Jimmy Johnson's had to change his driving style. And we've seen Jimmy make mistakes. And we've seen other drivers make mistakes with this package. So it's a little bit different. But Kyle has always been that guy that you throw the COT on him. Boom, he wins the first race. And then gets out and says the biggest piece of crap he ever set in. But he won with it. Yeah. You change a body style. Boom, he wins. You know what I mean? So it's been kind of a little puzzling to watch him go through this process with this car and not be the first guy to latch onto it and just dominate with it.
That's a good point. Yeah, and he talked about being frustrated Sunday night at Texas that he couldn't figure out what to tell the team.
Yeah.
Like it had him flummoxed, which is weird for
yes.
a guy like that who always is so adaptive, but certainly another championship would go a long way to solving that. All right, before we let you go, I want to wrap up here. Talk about another Kyle Larson, who felt as if he was wronged by Bubba Wallace intentionally spinning. Up for debate whether it was an intentional spin. I think that I guess it's up for debate only in the sense that Bubba Wallace hasn't come out and said I spun intentional. I think everybody feels as if it's fairly obvious that was him causing the caution on purpose. Same with Logano the week before at Martinsville. That was fairly and Boyer I think as well. So we just talked about this on NASCAR America, but I want to give you the chance, this platform, to kind of expand on it because I've heard you talk about this a little more at length, and I think there's more to it from your perspective than just drivers doing it intentionally. You also have to factor in NASCAR and the way they officiate races. Right?
Yeah, you do. And I'll go back to Martinsville, and let's just go back to Martinsville. If you go back to Martinsville, there were guys early in the race at Martinsville that scraped the wall. Boom, yellow's out, caution's out. And they did it 2 or 3 times. NASCAR quick with the caution, threw the caution in the first segment, second segment, whatever. But then we get down and Boyer has trouble and Joey has his issue. Where's the caution? You threw one like an hour ago for a less flagrant or a lesser incident on the racetrack. Why didn't you throw it? If they had thrown it, we wouldn't have had a car spin. You wouldn't have had a car spin. So you cut it off right there. So Joey and Clint obviously felt like because NASCAR didn't give them their caution, whether it deserved, perception, whether it was deserved or not deserved or whatever, they felt like, well, we're not getting our caution, so we'll get our own caution. Okay? So they got their caution. I don't remember a huge outcry on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday before we got to Texas about people causing cautions. And there were more cautions caused at Martinsville by people intentionally spinning than there were at Texas.
Yep.
Okay? Yep. Now, let's go to Texas. And there is no doubt in my mind that Bubba spun that car to get a caution. And you know what? I do not fault him at all because he had a flat. Drivers are greedy. It's all about Bubba. You know what I mean? This is all about Bubba spinning, staying on the lead lap, doing whatever he had to do for him and his team. And that's what every driver does. Every driver, nobody, and you said, we were talking with Jeff Bird. I looked at Jeff, I said, did you ever do anything on the racetrack and say, I'm going to do this because that's going to help that other driver? No, you didn't. It was about you, and that's the way it has to be. So Bubba spins, and he's thinking about him. He's not thinking about Kyle Larson. He's not thinking about Eric Jones. He's not thinking about Joey Logano. He's not thinking about Kevin Harvick. He's not thinking about anybody. He's thinking about him, okay? He spins. Does it ruin their night? Yes. Has Kyle Larson ever spun and stopped on the racetrack? Yes.
He has. He
Yes.
did at Eldora Speedway and then won a race.
And he was penalized for it.
Penalized a lot.
And I think that's should be Kyle's argument.
Yeah.
You penalized me for doing it one time. Why didn't you penalize that guy? Not point at Bubba and say, that ruined my race. It did ruin your race. We got it. I got you, dude. You know what I mean? And that's okay. But, you know, we see other guys on a weekly basis have issues and come back. He didn't come back the way he wanted to. And that's not a knock on Kyle Larson. I think they looked at that specific incident and said, that ruined our race. And I do understand that. But I don't fault Bubba. I don't fault Joey. I don't fault Clint for causing it. You know, NASCAR either is going to have to call it or do what they do and not call it and let you spin. Now, I would rather him just not call it and let you spin, okay? Because I'm not up to my eyeballs with different Rule -67-1.3. Only on sunny days when the temperature is between 72 and 82, we will call this rule. You know, I mean, at some point in time, you have to either let them play or don't let them play. You know what I mean? And for me, you gotta figure it out. But at the same time, I understand Kyle Larson's frustration, to think we were close enough. We felt like the track was coming to us. We felt like everything was going to be where we needed it to be able to move on. And look, this is the farthest that a Ganassi car, this is the farthest that Kyle has gotten, and he sees it slipping away, and he ran all day long, and he gained 1 point.
Yeah.
He went from 24 out to 23 out. So that's a frustrating day for a team. That's a frustrating day to put in a solid effort, to put in a solid day, and be able to point at that car over there and say, that's the reason I finished here, and I only gained 1 point. So I do understand the frustration, but that's part of the pressure and part of the playoffs.
Yeah, and it's probably not going to, if he doesn't make the championship round,
that's not the reason. That's not the reason.
Tony Stewart, by the way, I asked him after Harvick's win, because he came in the media center, asked him, he said the same thing that you just did about intentional cautions. NASCAR just needs to stay out of it. Less rules, more black and white. And it sounds to me like it's one of those, you know it when you see it.
That's right.
You know, like if it's a flat tire and somebody spins, maybe you always allow dispensation there. But if it's Clint Boyer intentionally spinning to manipulate a race outcome,
that's totally different. That's totally different. You know, and you know, when you see the flat tire thing and you see that, I got you. You know, but you're right. You know, the intent is still the same, no matter what, because not with the manipulating a race, but the intent to cause a caution is if it's there, then maybe you need to say, okay, there was intent, let's throw it. But God, man, what are you gonna do? Put cameras in every car, put a GPS in, and I'll go back to Bubba's just for a minute, and I've said it when we were doing it, even though it looks like he's running probably 35 or 40 miles an hour when he spins, he's still running 75 or 80 miles an hour with a flat tire when he gets to that point, whether he's up on the track or not. So you kind of got to keep some of that in mind too. It's not as controllable as you look. Obviously, I can attest to that. Obviously, because if you do spin to cause a caution to help yourself, don't do as Bubba Wallace and hit the inside wall at the same time, okay? Because that's not cool. You know what I mean? You want to keep your car going right. Yeah, good advice and good analysis. We appreciate you putting a period on this discussion. We have now thrown the yellow flag or maybe the red flag on all intentional I hope so, man. I hope so.
For the remainder of the playoffs. Thanks so much for being here, man.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me, as always.
All right.